What's up? It's your girl Nisha, and welcome back to another episode of Laughing and Crying. Hey people, if you don't know, now you know. Just kidding. If you don't know, this podcast explores both the beautiful and the painful experiences that relationships bring, and yes, that even means the relationships we have with ourselves, people. So prepare yourself to laugh at the stupid mistakes that I've made in my relationships, because I talk about them and it's a lot, so that we can ultimately learn from them and heal from them. That's the point. Of course, if you're new, welcome. I'm excited you're here, and for everyone else, what's up, podcast land? How are you? Welcome back, and thanks for being my people. If you think more people should listen to the show, you can help me get the podcast noticed by sending an episode to a friend, writing a review on Apple Podcasts, and by continuing to share on social media. And if you personally want to go deeper into the topics and, laugh harder with me and us, join me over on Patreon, because we over there. If you have any podcast episode ideas, Patreon would be the place to let me know. That's where I go for inspiration. Also on Patreon, you get the podcast early. You get the video version of the podcast. What up, Patreon? Shout out. And what else? Personal vlogs. So much more. Whatever else I want to put up there. So you don't want to miss out on that opportunity. Nobody in the building today. It's just me. Hey, people. I'm alone today, but it's okay because we're about to have fun anyway. Today's show is going to be a good one. We're going to start out with a new segment called Did You Hear About? And then we're going to have a conversation about compatibility, and it's going to be super interesting. The reason I wanted to, well, first of all, yes, there's a new segment because I wanted to try out something new, which is having a segment called Did You Hear About, where I take certain things from pop culture, something that's in the news that ties into what we talk about here on the show, or anything funny, interesting in the news that I give my take on before we jump into our topic. So today I wanted to talk about something I heard about. Actually, it's funny. I heard about it on another podcast that happened recently. It's not super recent, maybe about, a week or so ago. So this guy's on Twitter, and he tweets about the fact that he tried to connect with this girl on like a relationship type situation. You know what I mean? I tried to hit on her or whatever. Like, hey, let's connect. Let me give you my information. You give me your information. Let's try to make this happen. Okay. Homegirl was like, cool. Got something for you to do first. And this is so interesting, the way that she did this, because as you guys know, I'm married, so I'm completely out the game. But I was just like dying at the fact that this happened. So, okay. So he posts on his Twitter after the fact, can you believe what this girl did? She sent me this Google form, basically saying I had to complete this Google form before she would fully connect with me, as far as going out on a date, talking, like whatever. And so when I started to hear the questions that were on this Google form, at first I was like, nah. But she was real serious. I thought it was a joke. It was not a joke. Because she says that she wants to stop wasting her time, and she wants to be sure that the person that she's talking to or giving her time to is worth her time. Which is, we're going to talk about it, okay? But here's the questions that were posted that were in the Google form that the guy ended up tweeting out, I guess to kind of like put her on blast. But it kind of actually ended up backfiring on him, because all these other women were like, yes, I'm going to do this. But I just kind of want to see what your opinion is, podcast land. Okay, so here's some of the questions. Do you believe in marriage, or is it just an unnecessary piece of paper? Yes or no? or I guess state your answer. Because some of these are like long form. You have to put a question and you have to put an answer, like write out an answer, or some of them are multiple choice, right? So do you believe in marriage or is it just an unnecessary piece of paper? Do you have kids? If so, how many? Do you want kids? Is there anything preventing you from having kids? How would you describe your financial / employment situation? And some of these had like multiple choice, but I didn't write down them all because it was like a good 25 questions. Are you a person of faith? Christian, Muslim, other? What's your zodiac sign? Sun, moon, and rising sign if you know it. If you don't know it, what's your birthday? Hilarious. Can you swim? Now this one, I was like, bruh, that's kind of real. Because some people out here can't. And if you want to go do stuff with your life, you know what I mean? You just want to know what you're dealing with. I'm not saying, well, I'm not going to put my opinion in just yet, but you know, I got the hot take. No, I'm joking. Does the toilet tissue go over or under for you? Hilarious. What's your preferred method of communication? Text, call, video, face-to-face, other. Like, highest level of education. Undergrad degree, bachelor's, master's, or other. Name one no skips album or mixtape. Okay, I actually want to answer this one, even though I don't want to date this girl, of course. But let me see. I would have to say, first of all, any of Chance the Rapper's mixtape. Ass to Rap was everything. 10 Day was awesome, great. Chance the Rapper's first album, he wanted to say Coloring Book. It was Coloring Book. I'm like, why do I keep wanting to say Coloring Book? Okay, Chance the Rapper's first album, Coloring Book. Kanye, Graduation. Kanye, Late Registration. Kanye, College Dropout. What else? No Skips. Corinne Bailey Ray? What's that album called? Oh, Corinne Bailey Ray, self-titled. There you go. Adele, 21, 19, 25. I ain't gonna lie, I skipped some on 30. But yo, no skips. What else? So y'all gotta tell me I wanna know your no skips. Okay, hit me up on Instagram, hit me up on Patreon. Let me know your no skip album or mixtape. Moving on. Top 3 sitcoms, TV shows of all time. Listen, I'm gonna answer this too. These are good questions. I'm just saying. Top 3 TV shows. Friends. I don't have 3. I have like 5 that I will watch all the time. The Middle, Friends, Everybody Hates Chris, Abbott Elementary, Psych, Schitt's Creek. Yeah, I'll watch those like 1,000 times over. Just saying. Okay, single people. First of all, I don't know how I feel about the list. But single people, would you participate in this? Like, would you hand out the list? Do you think it's fair? Do you feel like you're wasting your time? Married people, do you think that this would have helped you be more confident in your decision to date your spouse? Like, if you were able to ask them, and there were more than these, there were questions about hygiene. There were questions about how you think of relationships. There were questions about when you feel like it's the right time to make something official. So there were more questions, and I'm pretty sure if you Google it, you could find the Google form or something like that. This girl ended up getting like thousands and thousands and thousands of responses after that guy tweeted her. So hopefully, cross fingers, she found her man's. But we'll see. But I just want to know, hit me up. Tell me, single people, would you participate in this at all? Married people, do you think this would have helped you make a more confident decision in your dating season or when you were dating your spouse at all? I don't know. Like for me, I think I did something similar to this when I was already in a relationship. I just asked more questions to make sure I understood what I was getting into. The only qualm I have with it is that people lie. So just because you're asking a question does not mean that somebody's telling you the truth. She was very specific in her questions though. So, I mean, we don't know. But not everybody's going to tell you the truth. Not everybody's going to represent themselves the way in which you feel like is an honest representation of who they are. And sometimes some stuff you don't want to know all up front. You could be ruling out people before you have a chance to really get to know them. Stuff that you think that matters beforehand may not matter after. If there were some things that I knew about Dre beforehand that would have made me feel ick or not wanted to date him, I don't think I would have ever got married to him. So I don't know about this one. This one's a toss up for me. I see the benefits of it. I see the pushback, because also, would someone like be turned off by you doing this? Because it's kind of anal retentive. I don't know. Anyway, it leads me into this conversation because it prompted this conversation in my mind about compatibility. So if we're moving into the conversation that we're going to have on the podcast today, it is compatibility overrated? So this person has this Google form, right? Because she's trying to figure out how compatible, like, do you know how to swim? Can we take a trip? If we go to a lake, are you going to freak out, right? She's trying to figure out how compatible they are. But I guess my question moving forward is, even beyond this form, is compatibility overrated? Is compatibility a thing? And so I'm going to be trying to like explore that question today, because part of me doesn't even know my answer. Like, I think I have an opinion up front, but I also am like, I kind of want to explore it a little bit too. So one thing I didn't do was get a definition for it. Let's see. Ooh, this is a good definition. Okay, the definition of compatibility. The definition of compatibility is a state in which two things are able to exist or occur together without problems and conflict. Okay, that makes sense. That's kind of the definition I had in my head. And a little bit more about me. So I got married when I was 29, I think. I had a long, I won't say long, it wasn't long, but some people be getting married and like when they're like 21 and 22. So that's why I say long. But I had quite a bit of time in my 20s to think about, or to imagine who I would end up with. And part of me thought, okay, in order for someone to handle me, they're going to have to be assertive because I'm very assertive. They're going to have to be outgoing because I like being around a lot of people. I like being out in the world. I love relationships. So they'll have to like relationships. They're going to have to be a little bit silly or else I'm going to get on their nerves. They're going to have to be really passionate about something because I hold a lot of passion. And I just thought that's what would work. We would then be compatible. They shared my faith. If they shared kind of my view on the world, my view on relationship, my view on commitment, then we'd be compatible. They'd have to be into music. They'd have to be into food because I'm a trained chef and I love food. They'd have to just kind of love traveling and adventure and all these types of things. That was just kind of my story. And I met Dre, and he's quiet. He's quiet. He's very quiet. He's very nerdy. He likes his alone time. He had a completely different background than I did. He grew up a little bit rougher than I did. He kind of chose to kind of figure life out on his own rather than taking the sort of forged path of education and this is what you got to do next and this is what you got to do and this is what you got to do. Whereas I kind of took that route of like, of course, this is what you do after high school. This is what you do after college. And we were just very different. But in my mind, I always thought, well, compatibility helps with lessening arguments, being on the same page with the other person about joint decisions, being able to grow together and not grow apart. And I think, and I kind of told this story here on the podcast, that over time and being in a relationship and even friendships with people who did not think like me has led me to believe a little bit that rubbing up against someone in a way that's not what you expect is helpful. So someone posed another question, so I'm gonna ask you guys, like, what is compatibility truly? Like, we got the definition, but is compatibility the long Google forum? Or I know that a certain number of people may believe that compatibility is like the big three: the faith, politics, and your belief in marriage / commitment in a relationship. Are those what makes you compatible? Like, if you have faith, politics, and belief in marriage, commitment, like, if you have those in common, do you consider yourself compatible? Or do you feel like the longer list of like, no, like, you have to like the same music I like, you have to like the same TV shows, you have to care about family the way I care about family. Like, what do you consider being compatible? For me, I think I've kind of landed in a place where I feel like compatibility is more a mindset. Compatibility is deciding, like, what are your goals? And if your goals are compatible, where you start doesn't matter as much. I think that's kind of what I'm exploring in life is if I meet someone, right, friend or otherwise, and in my situation, it wouldn't be otherwise, but if anyone, if anyone meets someone, right, and it's a friend or whatever, and they're like, okay, this person is nothing like me. But when you sit down and have a conversation, they're like, I'd love to travel, but I really, really like staying home, or I've never really traveled. Or if they're like, I want to learn, but they know nothing that you know. Isn't compatibility the same as like saying, well, hey, if you want to learn, I'll teach you. And then at the end, we'll kind of be able to appreciate the same things. Like, for instance, okay, that might have sounded confusing. Okay, for instance, one of my best friends, and you guys know, I'm a trained chef, I'm a foodie, I love all of those things. And so I kind of grew up in my young adult life being like, whatever I eat has to taste good, has to be of good quality. Like, I wasn't the McDonald's chick, okay? I'm very bougie about food. Very bougie. It's kind of off-putting. It's kind of disgusting. No, I'm joking. But I'm very bougie about food. And so I meet this girl, we become friends, and oh, you guys know her, Tasha. I'm talking about Tasha. Okay, so my friend Tasha was always I eat to live. So whatever's there, whatever I fix, whatever I make, whatever I'm used to, whatever I'm comfortable with, that's what I'll eat. And then she met me. And I'm like, go here, go there, enjoy the food. It's not just about eating. Sometimes it's about enjoying it. Sometimes it's about an experience. And subsequently, her friend, her best friend is like into wine. So she's like, enjoy the wine. And I'm like, enjoy the food. And she's like, I hate you both. But either way, she had an openness to learn and to explore. And although we were not compatible, it's like she wasn't like, I love food, I want to hear about food. And even to this day, sometimes she's like, okay, why do you have to do all this? Can we just go to somewhere normal? But at the end of the day, now she has her own appreciation for food. And so when she meets other people and they're like, have you tried this restaurant? Have you tried that restaurant? They're like, wow, you're real bougie. And she's like, huh, I am bougie now. And so, like, I think for me, compatibility has come down to how open your mind is to wanting to change. Now I guess that kind of leads me into my next question, which is, okay, how do you guys feel about, does the push and the pull in a relationship when you're, quote, uncompatible truly strengthen it, or does it truly weaken it? Because there's so many people that say both. You know, you have the crowd that says, oh, that rubbing up against each other is like sandpaper, and at some point you'll be polished, and, you know, all of those things. And so you want somebody that's going to pull on that's going to like poke the places you don't want to be poked, so that you can deal with those places. Because if you have someone who doesn't poke those places, you'll end up being complacent. Fair. But then there are other people who are like, well, if you're always arguing and you're always in disagreement and you're always in misalignment, are you really growing something that will hold? Or are you just, you know, kind of day by day patchworking and band-aiding the situation that's ultimately going to fall apart because it's not built on anything foundational? So I just wonder what you guys think about that. I'm trying to figure out my opinion. I hate to ride the fence and say both. I think it could do both. I think it can be both. I think that personally, what it ultimately boils down to, and you can disagree with me, is that the things that will break you are the things that won't budge. And the things that will strengthen you are the things that you're willing to have humility about, have an open mind about, and be willing to adjust. Do I believe that, right, you're able to adjust everything that you believe? No. And I don't think you should. But I do think that there are way more things that should be up for debate about whether or not we should change than we give credit to. And, you know, we have this like fight with this word compromise. And I just feel like, or I guess I'll ask you guys, is compromise or being willing, as we're talking about, does it strengthen it, does it weaken it, should you change? Is compromise or being willing to cede to some of your opinions or strong-willed beliefs a good thing? Or do you actually feel like it changes who you are and you shouldn't feel like you have to change who you are to be in a relationship? I've heard both. I don't really know. I know that since being in my marriage, I have had to change. You guys would not believe how much. I don't feel like in my marriage, it's so funny because I do feel like fundamentally I've changed who I am. I don't feel like I've changed who I am in the sense that I don't feel authentic to myself. But here's an example. Like, I used to be this person where I'm like, I don't care what anybody thinks. I used to always say this, and all my friends know I have this quote: I don't care about he, she's, them, they's, whatever the case may be. Like, my opinion is my opinion, my belief is my belief. And if someone comes up and says, you should believe this, or you should do this, or you should do that, I don't really care what they think. Where there are some people out in the world who are like constantly kind of like ruminating on what somebody else thinks, that has never been me. Well, being in relationships with people who think more, who care more about what other people think, has given me some pause and has made me, initially it made me feel like kind of like insecure, because I always assumed that people who cared what other people thought were insecure. So it made me feel insecure. But then as time went on, I realized kind of the importance of it. And I kind of realized that sometimes it's important to understand the ability to care about what somebody else thinks, because that's an important part of empathy. And so I do feel like I am a more consciously empathetic person now because I've been rubbed up against from people who thought differently than me, which makes me feel like a different person, because there are times now where I have this conflict within myself of like, man, was that person upset? Did I hurt that person's feelings? Where before I was like, if they have their feelings hurt, they'll tell me or they'll deal with it. I feel different, but I think it's kind of up to us whether or not we deem that a positive thing or a negative thing. So anyway, that's something to chew on. What's your opinion? How did you feel about this conversation about compatibility? At the end of the day, do you feel like compatibility is something that is super, super important, that you should put your sword in the sand on, as far as when you're dating, or for married people when you talk to single people about dating, which I don't necessarily recommend because we don't know nothing. I'm just like, dating is hard out here in these streets, and I don't be knowing what I'm talking about. But if there is some single person that comes to you asking your advice and they ask you about compatibility, what would be your opinion? What would you say? And for single people, how do you feel not only about the Google form and the boldness of this woman, but how do you feel about compatibility, and what does that mean where you're going out and trying to find relationships of your own, whether that be friendships or romantic relationships? Anyway, how do you feel? I hope you took something away from this conversation that we had today, and just it helped you to think more into how you go about life, how you see relationships, and all that jazz. I'd love to hear what you love most about this podcast episode. And is there a topic that you're itching to be like, Niche, talk about this next? I'm here for that. Hit me up on Instagram, where I'm most active at Unleash the Niche. DM me, or you could also find me on any other platform at Unleash the Niche. That's probably Twitter, TikTok, and all those other jazzes that I'm not as active on, but I'll see it eventually. But if you want to get my attention for real, hit me up on Patreon. Join the Patreon. Join the Patreon. You get the podcast early, you get the video versions of the podcast and the vlogs with myself and my family. So head to patreon.com/unleash the niche to join the niche gang, which is what we call the Patreon people. Your podcast land, their niche gang. So niche gang, if you're listening, what up, what up? Well, that's it. Always love hanging out with you guys. And, maybe we can impact the world or something. I'll leave you with that. Bye.